I am fantasy and romance author Leslie Penelope, and this is Imagining Success, an interview series where I talk to authors who have achieved career milestones that others only dream about and ask them how they got there and where they go from here. Today, I speak with author, book packager, company president, nonprofit CEO, and a woman who apparently never sleeps, Dhonielle Clayton. She is a New York Times bestselling author of the Controverse series, the Belle series, and co-author of Blackout, Whiteout, The Rumor Game, and the Tiny Pretty Things duology, which was adapted into a television series on Netflix. We talk about writing with purpose, the real markers of success, and of course, imposter syndrome. Her perspective is one you do not want to miss. I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Thank you, Dhonielle. Welcome. I really appreciate you being here with me today.
Thank you so much for asking me. I'm a big fan, so I'm so glad I get to be on your podcast and we get to talk about all the things. So
yes, and I'm a huge fan of yours and your podcast and all of the millions of things that you do. It's just, it makes me tired, like when I just kind of read your bio.
I know, I am tired too, but yes, I appreciate it.
So at the beginning, like before publishing, why did you start writing in the first place?
Well, I didn't want to be a writer. I wanted to be a doctor and I failed chemistry. And then my parents were like, you better get your life together. And I was just a teacher and a librarian. And I was telling young people what to read. A book bully. I'm tiny and have a lot of opinions. And then my students started asking me why they weren't in books. And I started looking and looking and looking, especially for the types of books they wanted to read. Science fiction and fantasy, big romance, these big sort of adventures where the save the world type of things. They found themselves in the books that press down on, the bruises and like the history, which is fine. We need those books too. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing because they asked me to. They asked me for certain types of stories. And I thought, well, I've got my master's in children's literature. Why don't I try to get an MFA and see if I can actually do this? I had only taken one writing class beforehand to get my master's. They forced us to take one creative writing class. It was painful and torturous. But then I thought, well, let me see if I can do this. And so I just started writing for them, just to center them and to create a table for them that was like exciting and centered their experiences and who they are, but also gave them magic and mischief and adventure and romance and drama. Because, middle schoolers, they just want the drama.
Right. Wow. It's so fascinating doing this and seeing how everyone, like their origin story, because you're just so unique. It's like so many writers start because they have something inside of them that has to get out, but you're really forward focused on the babies, on the kids. And
I had something inside me. I mean, some people would say, oh yeah, you're an artist and you've got blah, blah, blah inside me. And really it's about when you're in a classroom full of kids or a school library full of kids who are in your face asking you for things and you can't find them. Right. And you can't find something that like scratches that itch, that fills that need, that helps grow their imagination. That's a recipe to get really angry and frustrated and sad. And that's what happened. Like, I think I have stories in me. Yes, I tell stories, but really my North Star are those young people, are those people who I think our next generation, we have to build their imagination so that then they can become writers and readers.
Yeah. Well. So I'm sure publishing was top of mind. Were you sharing the stories with them first as you wrote them, or were you just going straight towards trying to get published?
Well, I was first, because I'm an academic first, a scholar first, I was trying to figure out what is the puzzle of publishing. How do books get made? Who are the key stakeholders? Who are the players? Who are the gatekeepers? So I was writing these stories and I was getting my MFA, and I was actually like the oldest intern alive. And I worked with a literary agent first. And I thought, let me see what your job is. How are you a gatekeeper? How do you keep certain books out of publishing? How does your taste dictate what goes on the shelves? So like I did that. And then I worked in a bookstore. And then I was like, okay, so here's the other piece. And I just went sort of towards all of the different sort of big key stakeholders that are on the outside to learn the pipeline. And then I sort of looked at, okay, now let me use my master's. Let me look at the canon. Let me look at what is published and who's missing. What kids are missing. And then let me think through how I can find ways to fill those holes. Mm-hmm. and come in and use my writing, use my, I also launched a packaging company, use my ability to create IP that can fill those holes that I'm seeing and give publishers a new model, thinking about you can have highly commercial stories that feature all types of people from all types of backgrounds that happen to be inside of this highly commercial, high concept book. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of how I went at it. It was like more of a maybe mercenary approach.
Well, really strategic. Like it was a whole lot of strategery going on there, it sounds like.
Yes. Just trying to understand the puzzle, because I think that when you're trying to break something or you're trying to remake something, understanding the components are a key part of that.
Yeah. So you went in knowing you wanted to break it or remake it.
Remake it.
Remake
Yes.
it, yeah.
Yeah, the
So did
remake.
you started the packaging company before you published your first book, or is it at the same time?
It was the same time.
Okay.
Same time to show sort of what I meant when I say
Mhm.
that you can have a high concept, highly commercial book that features kids from different backgrounds, and they are just embroiled in whatever mystery thriller event it is or whatever the plot is, but how they move through the world is informed by their culture and community, but
Mhm.
it is not the sole focus of the text. It doesn't have to be all
Yeah.
of it.
So at the outset, what did you think success would look like for you? What were you trying to hit on?
I think the way that I was raised by Southern country bumpkins from Mississippi, farm people, right? And so I grew up in a household that believed that the measure of success wasn't you being the only one in the room, you getting to the top of the mountain. My mother or my grandmother would turn around and say, "Who did you bring with you? Who did you teach to fish? Who did you help?" Because
Mhm.
you getting to the top is not success. It's about who you brought with you. And I think for me, that sort of communal thing is that the collective we as Black Americans didn't get anywhere without being together. And so that is my measure of success. It's how many people I got seats at the table for, how many people I taught how to do a thing or helped them along their way in their journey. And so I think that's why everything to me is the outward. It's like, how many kids can I influence by getting them these books that feature them and families like them and help grow their imagination? Or how many writers can I give a piece of my own intellectual property to and teach them how to write books, to make books, to sell books, and to enter publishing? And how many books can we get in the bookstore that can disrupt the status quo?
Mhm.
So for me, it's a sort of outward exercise.
And as you've been in it longer, as you've been in the industry longer, has that shifted? Has that expanded or changed in any way?
My vision of success?
Right.
No, I think I've doubled down on it, tripled down on it. Now it's just about, getting fine tuning my machine to
Mhm.
be able to do that, and to expand it. So it's like, okay, now let's talk about film and television. Let's talk about how we can get more opportunities for this existing IP to translate and to center more BIPOC and marginalized people to get more jobs for those actors and actresses and people behind the camera. Like, I think it's just expanding it and creating an even bigger table,
Mhm.
I think. But I think that the reason I like doing this job is because I get to interact with other people. So success to me is always sort of, how can I make that sort of rap crew even bigger, like on the stage or whatnot? How can we get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger of more people that are, you know, successful or moving or got something or uh,
Mhm.
are moving along in their journey
Right.
in some
Yeah,
sort of.
and having an impact. So
Mhm.
do the markers of like the writerly markers, like a lot of people talk about, oh, awards or New York Times bestsellers list, do those factor into that at all?
I mean, the New York Times bestseller list is bullshit. So we know that. We know that it's an anointed list based on, it's actually created by the people who do the polls, all of those pollings for political campaigns. So, and it's curated. So they get to decide. And sometimes they anoint certain people and they don't. There are many times I should have been on the list and they decided, well, no, you're not going to be on the list, even if we went to raw data and metrics. So I don't put any stock in that. Do I understand its value because the white gatekeepers believe it to have value? Yes. I understand that as a fake marker of success that white publishing has anointed as meaning something, that it can have some sort of value. So it would be great to see more, especially Black people, become New York Times bestsellers. But like, I can't also wait for that sort of white wand to anoint everyone. There's other ways to be successful, like raw numbers, and also other types of opportunities. You said something about, did you say reviews as well? Or you said
awards, reviews. Yeah.
The awards are very interesting because then again, I was a librarian. I've sat on committees. I've built an award. I built the Walter Award at We Need Diverse Books. I understand all of those conversations. I'm not a person who wins awards, so I never had that sort of award junkie feeling that I needed to have an award because I wrote the types of books that were discredited by the awards committees that focused on Black books. So the CSK, not to dunk on them, love the ladies, the church ladies is what I call them. They like certain kinds of books. I didn't write those books. I write books with magic in them.
Right.
And very few books with magic seem to make it through. So they're great. They're wonderful. They help other librarians create shortcuts to buying and for people to be able to be like, look at this book. So I love them. I think that they have immense and tremendous value. I just don't measure them as success for me because I don't write those kinds of books.
Right.
Success to me is a little kid who shows up dressed in a costume out of my world to look like my character, who's in line, who's obsessed, or who's writing me to my P.O. box, telling me everything, or they've added a chapter to my book, right? I'd take that any day over a sticker on the front of my book.
Right.
So.
And you work with a lot of authors, so you're kind of mentoring them, you're guiding them through the industry. Or do you see them coming in with these ideas of what success looks like that you have to educate them? Like, okay, this is false, this is rigged. Is that something that is that part of the business model of what you're doing as a packager and mentor?
Sure. I mean, I tell them the truth. And I think radical transparency about our business is the most important gift we can give people entering, especially BIPOC and queer and marginalized people, because there's going to be so many people that tell lies in publishing or obscure things. So yes, that is part of it. But also, I don't put my own viewpoints on these things on other people. People love awards. They want to win those awards. I let them have that. I'll let you enjoy that. That's your thing, right? Like, I'm not here to yuck your yum or pop your bubble. I'm just a hater on awards. Like, it's just not my thing. I don't want to tie my self-worth to a committee of people deciding whether or not my book is worthy. To me, and some people need that validation, and those award winners write amazing books. For me, I'm focused on my audience. If they love it and they're coming to me, then that's important to me. So I just provide all of the different points of view, or I try my best to, and allow them to choose what is valuable to them and what they think is success. But for me, having the book out, having it reach readers, having someone write to you to tell you that you've had an impact or changed the way they've thought, or that they're just damn excited about whatever it is, that's also success to me. That's also a win. You've had an impact, or you've touched someone, or you've helped them think about something differently, or just excited them, kept them up all night.
Right.
Reading.
Yeah.
That's a triumph, I would say.
Absolutely. So as a writer for your own work, do you experience imposter syndrome at all?
That's such an interesting term that comes up a lot, I see, in sort of writer communities, this idea of an imposter syndrome. And sometimes I don't really understand what it means. Does it mean that you don't feel like you belong? Does it feel like, is that what it technically means?
I think it means that whatever accolades or success or whatever level you've achieved, if someone says, that book was great, or you really, I really admire you. Some part of you feels like you don't deserve that, or they're lying to you, or they're gaslighting you, because there's something inside of you that many artists seem to feel, that like they're pulling one over on other people and they really don't know what they're doing. They're a hack and they don't deserve to be where they are.
Oh, that's so sad. I guess I guess I don't have imposter syndrome. Not like that. I think I'm an outgoing introvert and I can be shy and I don't like a lot of attention. So like the idea of the spotlight on me, I don't enjoy that. Just because I like to just be a little, I'm still the little girl who was under my grandmother's table with a stack of books that was like, don't look at me, mind your business. I'm doing my thing. I'm over here. I'm still at the core that little kid. Um, but I was raised by people who told me that that I was good and that I could do the things that I set out to do if I really focused and put my all into them. So I don't have imposter syndrome. I don't think that I deserve praise and accolades or whatnot. I know that I'm doing work and that work will have impact, whether it is that one kid who wants to dress up like my character or the person that I've helped them get another book deal or taught them something or got them a deal type of thing. So no, I don't have that kind of thing in me. Maybe I should. I don't.
No, of course not. No, absolutely. But what's interesting is the only other author who I've spoken to so far who has had that same reaction, was like kind of confused by the idea of imposter syndrome, was Beverly Jenkins.
Miss Bev.
Miss Bev was like, I don't have time for that. I don't know what that is. I wasn't raised like that.
It's true. I don't know. I think because I was raised by farmers, like it was just like farm folk from Mississippi. Like you were out there and you were making what you're making and like taking care of your family, and you don't have time to think about whether or not you deserve to eat. Like we are all out here making this food. We're all out here trying to make a table. And we're getting to work. We're getting to this work. So I just, yeah, I don't have time to, I really don't have time to even think twice about, you know what I mean? Whether or not everything's okay, because I'm very highly scheduled and,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of volunteer work with what I do with We Need Diverse Books. And then I'm running my companies and I'm writing, and I have a niece who's 18 and I'm trying to help her, get her ready for college. And like, there's like a lot that I guess my mind doesn't get quiet enough for the doubts to seep in.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that I've been fortified. I give it all to my parents and my grandparents and my family, that I have been fortified to have a stubborn will of steel. And then also to just feel like if I put a plan together and my heart and set my heart and intentions and get a bunch of people to work together, that we can do a lot of things.
Yeah. And I think the other commonality is being purpose driven,
Yes.
because Ms. Bev was saying that too. Like the core engine that drives you, if it's purpose, if it's giving back to community, if it's feeling like you're connecting with other Black people, for her it's Black women, for you it's kids, that doesn't leave room for all of this other doubt, and it's like it clouds the atmosphere.
You're so right. And it is that mission driven, purpose driven work. I feel like I was put here to make sure that Black children's imaginations were able to grow through the lens of books, and to make sure that they were fortified and that they had everything at their disposal to know that they can become readers, writers, big imaginative inventors, whatever it is. And I think having that means that I can't allow myself to have those doubts, because the young people that are looking to me, they don't need to, you know what I mean? Like I need to just have, the ship has to be moving in the right direction, and they can see my humanity and that I am tired and that, you know what I mean? It is a struggle and there are ups and downs, but just, it's a privilege to work in the arena that I work in, and to work on behalf of kids and to give them things that I think are exciting and to make opportunities for them. So that's a privilege. So I just, like Miss Bev, oh my God, I'm in such esteemed company. I love her so much.
Rarefied air.
I know, I'm obsessed with her. I just think she is just the bee's knees. She's the best.
She's fantastic.
Her books, just her presence. She's who I want to be.
Yeah, and so generous. Yeah, so I think you're on the track as far as I can see.
If I get to be like her, that's a win. That is a win.
So I wanted to ask you about the TV show. And, you are an author who's kind of achieved one of the dreams of many authors have to see their work made into the screen, the bigger the little screen. And can you talk a little bit about that process? And, was that part of your initial plan? I know you kind of expanded, like, let's conquer everything. But yeah, what was that like to have that happen?
Sure, it's a privilege, and it is a rare gift that writers get to see their imaginations translated on the big or the small screen. And it feels like a marker of success. It's something that everyone says that they want. Well, most writers say, I want a TV show or I want a film. But what they don't realize is that you can get that thing and it can still be bad. It can still not be everything that you wanted, right? And like at the onset, you're like, oh, this is great. I got this thing. And then you see what it is and you're like, oh, this is not the thing that I thought it would. It doesn't scratch the itch. It doesn't fulfill the notch on the success belt. It doesn't make me feel like I got the missing piece and that I have somehow landed at the top of the mountain now. And so parts of it were great, parts of it were trash. And I don't see it. I see it as both a success and a failure. It's a success that I got lucky enough that Netflix wanted to make my first book, the first thing I ever got published, into a TV show. That TV show was #1 for weeks. It was in the top 10 for weeks and all of that. It still got canceled. That show also was not my book. It took 3 of my characters, it remixed them and changed them in some ways that were so disrespectful and hurtful and painful to watch. That was difficult for me. It also, my book is a book for teenagers. It's basically like a PG-13, and it made it TVMA. And so it meant that when I go to schools, I have to deal with angry parents and librarians that are upset with me that something that's associated with a book that they really like, a book that they recommend to their students, that now there's something that is pornographic that is associated with it. I got called, a child pedophile type of thing because of the content in the show, like online, going viral, things like that. So it is both a success and a failure, and that it brought some benefits to my life, but it also really, really affected me in other ways. And so, but those are the breaks, right? Some things have net positives, some don't.
No, and I think that writers don't understand that you don't have control unless you are in. I'm going to ask the next question, but like, unless you are in a specific position to be able to keep control, the first instances, often you have nothing to do with it and it's not your work. I have a background in film. My brother is an actor and he's been in adaptations that I'm like, oh, wait. And I've read the original and like seen that and I'm like, yes. So it does seem to be a double-edged sword often. Now, are you in a position, because you've had other things optioned, to be able to demand more access, more to be, whatever credits you have to get to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Yes. So that is one of the bonuses that come out of it is I now know what I don't want. Sometimes we don't know what we don't want until we experience it. Right. And so now I know that I didn't like that. So now I know that if anyone wants to option my material, I have to be involved in some capacity in a meaningful way. And now I know that I had to have lawyers that had my best interests at heart that would negotiate those deals on my behalf outside of a studio or a film rep, that would put me forward and say, nope, you have to deal with her. She is the underlying IP owner, and therefore she will be an executive producer on every single thing. And you have to consult her. Not that I will get my way every time, but if you want to work in my sandbox with my characters and with my material now going forward, you have to deal with me. You can't just sort of cast me out. I'm not just window dressing. So I learned a mighty lesson. And I feel like that was a success, a personal sort of educational success. I'm working on my Hollywood literacy and working on sort of like how each deal gets better and better. But that was the lump that you take along the way when you're learning.
Yeah, there's so many ups and downs in the industry. There's so many, and you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And then you're like, I should have asked that question. I didn't even know that was a question that I should have asked or something I should have been aware of.
And now
And
I like to talk to other writers about it because I'm like, don't do what I did. Don't, you know what I mean? Don't have the
yeah.
rose-colored glasses. Don't forget to ask these questions. Don't think that being a squeaky wheel is a good thing, because then you'll end up with something that you are embarrassed of, something that detracts from the value of your original
Hmm.
identity, something that, you know what I mean, that
Yeah.
is attached to your name forever.
And so many writers are in that position. Like there's so many adaptations that go off the rails that just like the New York Times list, it almost seems like a false goal. Like it's something that sounds good that you think you should want, but the reality is so different and we don't understand that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's the thing that we're told, it's dangled in front of us. Of course, I want to see my characters on TV. Like, it's amazing going on set and saying, this is my imagination come to life. It's like walking around in a dollhouse made of your own imagination. It's so cool, right? But also, it's a translation of work, one that you don't control and one that has 100 more people and more money attached
Right.
to it that you're not involved in. So it is a false goal. It's an exciting goal to have, but don't go looking for it thinking that it's going to fulfill anything inside of you, or you know what I mean,
Yeah.
do anything. There are people, there are friends of mine that have had some of the most successful adaptations, and it has brought both greatness and misery to their life in equal measure. And so I think it's just enjoying the ride, figuring out, what do I want from this? Do I want, you know what I mean, money? That's great. Do I want to be involved in a way that teaches me a different medium? It's another goal, right? That you could have. Do I want to just do I want to just see how the sausage is made on the other side? That too. And I think I wish that I had someone to tell me, like, pick the one thing you want from this experience as your measure of success and go for that.
Hmm.
No adaptation is going to be everything. There will be highs and there will be lows. And then it's a product that is not yours at the end of it. It's just an iteration of something that was yours. And
Right.
coming to terms with that can be hard.
I wanted to ask about authenticity and writing with authenticity. And I know it seems core, very much aligned to your purpose. And when you are dealing with these corporations that are publishing companies that have their own ideas about things, like coming off of last week, I don't know if you saw that post about nobody buys books and about the publishing industry.
Yes.
Um, so
So my spirit still.
yeah, no, I dashed off a response post, like my ears were steaming.
Yes. Like, oh, I'm so bad.
Like what's happening here? But so often the markers of external success, especially for large corporations, are directly opposed to what it means for especially Black people, any marginalized person, to write with authenticity. And so how do you balance that? You're trying to get, or you're achieving, contracts for yourself and the authors that you work with, but also at a high level of authenticity. Can you talk about just balancing that?
Sure. I think that authenticity is the most commercial thing ever. So I think that part of it is publishers have gaslit us into believing that this idea that commercial means mainstream, means white, means cis, means het, means all of these things that are not us. And I think that people really want universal stories, but they want the specific is universal. And so what I try to do is I want to tell the most authentic story through the most commercial plot engine, because those things don't negate each other. And making sure that you have, for me, it's heroes that are rooted in culture and community. Because what I hate is reading a book where I feel like, I use the term a lot if I'm doing an authenticity read or if I'm talking to publishers, this idea of painting the roses red. So in Alice in Wonderland, when they're painting the roses red and then the red drips off, it's just a white rose. So it's like, no, 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 no. I want it to be a red rose that was planted in the garden, so that if the veneer were to come off, that you cannot pull the culture and community out and have anything left, that those things are baked in. So everything that I concept, everything that I write comes out of this idea of making sure that this is just not a character that happens to be Black, that their Blackness, their culture, their community, their axes of marginalization inform how they react to this highly commercial plot, how they navigate whatever interesting world we've got them in. And I think publishers, they just want to make money. And Black people spend a lot of money on movies and film and TV and music and books, actually. So that article, I was like, I'm not going to allow that to enter my spirits. You can terrorize white people with that, but you're not going to terrorize me. Okay, like I'm gonna, you know what I mean? I trust that it's a slow business, and slow and steady wins the race. And so I'm just going to keep turtling along with these highly authentic stories, because I know that readers will respond, and given enough time, we will build and keep building and create a new canon. But I'm not going to let the haters get me down, because that was a lot. That article. Right. It cooked me. I felt like my soul was getting singed. And I was like, oh, I rebuke this. Let me cleanse.
And there was just so many co-signers. And I was just like, there's so much ignorance, I think. Just, not pejoratively, but just do not know how things work. And I don't know if there's lots of reasons for that. Sometimes I feel like the publishing industry wants to keep writers, aspiring writers or aspiring authors ignorant in some ways. And that's part of how they perpetuate their power.
I agree with you. I also think that it's easy to keep, basically, I'll use the metaphor of they like to shit in their own pool and then have everybody run, right? You know what I mean? It's like a toxic pollution that they do. And people like to rage post. You get more clicks.
Yeah.
And more controversy when you do things like that. And it scares more people. And I think people like others to feel scared and uncertain, stable in this, because it means that we'll take shittier deals.
Mm-hmm.
We'll start crabs in a barrel. We'll start fighting for these, what we feel is a limited amount of pie, when really we can make the table bigger.
So as part of the We Need Diverse Books movement, the nonprofit, there's been a big shift. Like I started publishing in 2015. And so 9 years later, there's a huge shift in the industry. I started self-publishing initially because I honestly and truly did not believe that there was a publisher who would publish my first book, which was adult fantasy, Black and brown people with magic. And I'd heard all the horror stories from existing authors that experiences that they had gone through that I had no desire to go through. But we're in a very different moment now than when I started. And so how are the conversations changing? How are you seeing the publishing industry changing from, when did you start? What was your first book?
2015.
Right. Yeah. Same year. So, we've been at the same time, and you've been responsible for publishing so many more books, but how have you seen that shift happen?
It's so interesting, because when I was a librarian in 2011, there was like very few books in the children's side and even on the adult side that really were pushing through the ecosystem, right? Because books can be published and we just never hear about them, which is the problem. The machine doesn't turn on for everyone. And that's my biggest issue. And so I would say, yes, I am seeing a change. I am seeing more books by more marginalized authors come out. What I'm not seeing is for them to get the gas of the publishing machine to turn on for them, so that then they become #1 New York Times bestsellers, or that they have a table in Barnes and Noble, or that they become the big book club pick that everybody's reading, that everyone's talking about, that everyone's obsessed with. And so that's what I'm not seeing. And I'm not seeing that in any genre. I know that it is very hard for Black women to break in romance, that there is some real deep-seated sexual racism in reading, and the Walmart Wendy's of the world do not want to read about Black people falling in love or any other people falling in love. And then I see it across the board in every single genre, science fiction and fantasy. Very hard to get a Game of Thrones level big blockbuster hit that centers Black and brown people in secondary worlds, right? I'm waiting for N.K. Jemisin's to coalesce at that level, right? So every single genre, there's still the status quo players at the top. And then there might be a blip of one or two that get past and get to be the ones, the tokens. So we're still in token land, I feel like, in publishing. I do think that we have woken up people to say we have a problem, but there are a handful of editors, almost all of them white, that get to decide what is on the shelves in the bookstores. And their rejections and their taste and their curation is why we continue to be in this problem and have this issue. And so, and I go on submission a lot because I'm on submission as myself. I'm on submission through my company. So I am seeing these editors, these repeat editors, and their rejections and their coded language and how they talk and how they've literally curated sort of what romance looks like, what science fiction fantasy looks like, what historical fiction looks like. And that's the real problem, is that in order for the bookshelves to change, the editors have to change. The people in power have to change. We can't just wake them up and say that, hey, for your moral conscience, you should be also privileging voices of other types of people. It's more of other people's tastes deserve to curate what is in the bookstore, because you can't have a chance to have a fourth wing level success if we aren't centering and creating. That's a created product. Creating other products that can go viral, that have the same ingredients, that happen to feature and center different kinds of people in cultures and community. And so that's what I'm seeing is the next frontier is, one, we have book bans. We have a book ban problem on the children's side and the adult side, because they're going to come for the adult books too in the libraries. And we have a publishing machine, marketing machine problem where some of us get marketed and get to be viral sensations and the machine turns on, and some of us get to just, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll put a little money in and see, oh, it didn't work. We'll pull it all. Oh, those kinds of books don't work. So we're not going to buy any more of those books, because if such and such flopped and her book didn't do well, then we can't buy your book.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And that's, I think, the next frontier of problems that we have in publishing.
I will say that, I've had 3 editors at 2 different publishing houses, and all 3 have been Black women. So there are more being hired, and, those steps are starting to be taken, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of that work is starting. But I do think there's still a reader issue, not just white readers. I think that there's a lot of internalized racism, and so there's certain, especially with live events, you see there's certain other, like, everyone can be susceptible to the idea that there are certain stories that are more palatable to them than others.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. It's very painful, honestly, to watch Black women readers put on pedestals white women who are writing certain kinds of stories and showing up deeply for them, but not showing up deeply for the Black women that are writing similar stories that also deserve to have that level of hysteria and excitement about what they're creating. And you're right, we have a problem. I feel like I'm in high school again, and it's like, oh, everyone's wearing Birkenstocks, and I hate those. Not on them. I'm not saying that for real. Don't on me. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like everyone's wearing those, and I'm like, I don't want to wear those, but like, everyone's wearing them. So like, do I need to wear them? Because if I don't wear them, everyone's gonna be looking at me, and so then it becomes that whole thing. And I'm glad there are many more Black editors as well. I want them to have the power to make hits.
Yes.
I want them to be over groups of editors, and they get to anoint who the publishing machine turns on for. So that's what I'm hoping for, to see some power players, hit makers, where it's like, oh, the New York Times bestseller list or whatever, since everyone loves that marker of success, 10 of those titles were edited and acquired and published by Black women, on front of the desk and as the writers. Love to see it.
Yeah, that's where we're going. Hopefully, that's the goal. And I think there's all of the authors that are here now that weren't here 9 years ago. It's all proof that the machine is moving in a positive direction for the most part, I think.
I agree. I think we are better. We are getting better. We have work to do, but we are better. So if I was a librarian still, I would have so many more books to choose from. And so that's a win.
Yes.
Huge win. I'm actually jealous of the kids now. I'm
Yeah.
like, you got so much to read. Like,
Yes.
God.
I remember going to the bookstore and just looking for a black face on a fantasy book and like finding one and buying that book and, just searching for another few months for another one. And so
Mhm.
now they can do that very easily. And there's a little bit of jealousy and pride also that like, yes,
We're
it's
part of
happening.
it. We're
Yeah.
part of that. And then we're creating this literacy bridge from being young all the way to old, where
Hmm.
there's always something for you to read that could center your experience or someone like you. And that is definitely a measure of success and a win for sure. We are getting better. That's why when people ask me that question, they're like, oh, people want me to say, oh yeah, we've solved it. I'm like, we're getting better. We're getting better. And I think we can continue to get further along in the healthiness of the industry,
Right.
equitability.
So for you, has writing ever been hard for you?
Yes, it's awful. Writing is awful. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's painful. Which means that it's what I should be doing, right? It's like exercise. I find exercise to be god awful, but it feels so good afterwards once I've taken my body through that hellish experience and come out on the other end. I'm like, oh, I sleep so much better. I feel good. Like, it's so that's how I feel about writing. Writing it's a painful endeavor. I avoid it at all costs. Even when I have a deadline, which I have right now, and I avoid it and I avoid it. And I love it when I'm doing it, but it's painful. It's like it's a love-hate relationship. I don't know how it is for you. Some people are like, I love this. I'm like, this sucks. This is painful.
I think love hate is great, because I do love it. I can't not do it,
Right.
but the inertia is there. If I'm writing every day, then it's fine. And once I turn in the deadline and it's like time to think about the next thing, it's like if I don't keep going, I might never pick up the pen again.
People don't realize that and I don't write every day. I can't. My brain just doesn't work that way. I need to train it to do so. Because otherwise I'll write I'll write 10,000 words in a day, which wrecks my hands
Yes,
and my
I've done
wrist. But it's like this fugue state that I get in, and then it's like an obsession, and then I do that. But I find it very painful. I guess it's when you're telling the truth and you're creating something, like there's pain in the making. For me, there's pain in the making of that. It's just like, because I like to write from places of like anger or frustration or being bothered. So writing about those things become, it comes out as I'm writing it.
Yeah, I call it blood on the page. If
Yeah.
I'm not writing something that has some kind of blood on the page, then I don't think there's a purpose. Like I shouldn't be wasting my time. So if I can't find that painful part, even in a romance, there's going to be that internal conflict, that hurt and the pain. And if it's not there, then I have to dig deeper or I have to move on to something else.
Yes, that's such a great metaphor. Blood on the page. Yes, blood on the page. And I think I exist in like a pain cave where I'm like, everything's awful in here. I have to rewrite. And I love to rewrite, but it's like I have to redo this and like I have to think it all through. And there's all of that stuff. So no, it does not come easy. It's like super painful, but I love it. I'm addicted to it.
Right?
So
Yes.
I do it anyway. I'm not addicted to exercise. Even though I want to be. I'm going to try to be addicted to that too. But it's a
If you
glorious.
find something that you really enjoy, like, some kind of exercise that you love, then it's a little easier.
I need to figure that out because I'm addicted to cookies. So that is easy. And so I need something to counteract my love of cookies and sugar.
Okay, so final question. When someone calls you a successful author, how does that feel like in your body?
I guess I find it weird. I guess I'm thankful that someone sees me as a success, of course, because I feel like, oh, I'm working, I'm doing things. I guess I don't internalize it because I feel like I will feel fully like a success when the work is done. When I retire, when I stop doing what I'm doing, then I can look back and say, oh, we did all these things. This was amazing, type of thing. But while the work is still getting done, while We Need Diverse Books still has to exist, which to me feels like not a success yet, right? The fact that, we've made progress, but we are still, with progress comes the bans, comes like the backlash. There's still, I feel like, so much work to be done that I guess I can't take it as a win yet.
Mm.
And even when packaging and thinking about my company, there's still so many books that I want to do in order to center so many other different kind of people and help more people shorten that runway to publishing, that I feel like, oh, there's more work to be done. And maybe I'm a workaholic. I'm addicted to it. And I don't know how to take a vacation. And like, I think about it all the time, and I'm obsessed with stories. It's probably manicness around stories.
Just being a writer.
Like, I'm walking down the streets. Like, I was I live in Harlem, and I was walking around today, and I was like, oh, saw someone. I was like, oh, this could be interesting. And then I was like, oh, and then I saw something else, and I was like, I could put these two things together. And so my brain is constantly firing with stories or things to do or plot points or what I think would be exciting. And like, I'm waiting for that to quiet so that I could like enjoy some of it. But yeah, there's too much work to be done. So when people are like, oh, you're successful, I'm like, oh, I got a lot of work to do. So like maybe in 25 years, I'll be able to let that settle on me, which is bad, which is terrible.
Yeah, it's like there's always going to be work to be done. I don't know that the work will ever be completed. It's kind of like the idea of moving.
Please.
No, but like in a good way, that you can look back in 25 years and see your efforts have helped move things so far, and they're going to be so much further along, and like take heart in that, and like leave it for the next generation to get the next leg of the relay. Like the race isn't really over, because we're human beings and it's always going to be something happening. But if you don't, take that time to be like, okay, I've done this. Look at what I've done. Look at all this amazing stuff that's happened. Then you can never truly be happy with it. Where I think we're all, we're motivated people. You're extremely ambitious, and I totally understand. But it's like, and part of the reason why I'm talking to authors is to get a handle on this. That because I feel it too. It's like no matter what you do, there's more to be done. No matter how hard you go, and it feels bad to me. Kind of like I want to be able to be grateful, and I am grateful. And like, is it moving the goalpost is something that I'm just not sure about. Like you have to keep moving, but also
So bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad. You're right. I mean, this is like a therapy podcast because we all need to be called on our shit for this. And particularly with Black women, we will work ourselves into the ground. And I like think of my grandmother as just like toiling the soil. You just keep working until you are the soil, right? Until you are in it. And so, yeah, I think for myself, and this will hold me accountable because this podcast will exist forever, is my version of success should be rest.
Yes.
It's enough now.
It's enough.
It's enough.
That is a great place to end. Thank you so much, Dhonielle, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm such a big fan.
Dhonielle is inspiring on so many levels. She's thoughtful and strategic while being incredibly creative, business-minded, and professionally savvy. She is living in her purpose of lifting others up, not only writing her own books for children and young adults, which center the experiences of BIPOC and marginalized people, but also launching new voices into the industry via her book packaging company. If you are interested in learning more about Dhonielle or reading her work, I have links in the show notes. And if you haven't read her before, I recommend starting with The Bells, which is the first in her YA fantasy series. You can also sign up for the Footnotes newsletter, which includes the show notes for each episode of this podcast, as well as inspiration, strategies, and ideas to help you grow as a writer. That is at myimaginaryfriends.net/footnotes. When you sign up, you can choose to become an imaginary best friend for a few dollars a month and get access to the premium posts, quarterly workshops, as well as discounts on my courses and coaching. My course, Imaginary World Building, Creating Fictional Worlds for Writers, is currently on sale for 20% off. Find out more information at myimaginaryfriends.net. Next up in the interview series, I speak with an author who is one of my foundational influences, the legendary Tananarive Due. Make sure you're subscribed. Until the next time, keep imagining.